says, get that India. Big boy.
Call an ambulance! Maybe call a police! Oh, what a shot! What a shot! Campbell killer!
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Tip Sheet Podcast. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as Forty20, joining me to break down another week of news for the NRL and the Parramatta Eels and my good mates, Sixties and Clint. Fellas, tough loss of the Eels last week, but we pick ourselves up and get back into it. This time armed with a couple of, three big-time players coming back into the fold. But how you boys doing this week as we talk about news and news and more, I suppose?
Well, mate, as you know, it wasn't the best night to be out at the football last Saturday night. We had the duty to be over in the Leagues Club, Parramatta Leagues Club, home of the Eels, doing our instant reaction podcast. And we were greeted with a full house up in Jack's Bar and Grill. And then I thought Brett Kenny was outstanding in his chat with us up in Jack's, and it sort of helped. I thought a little bit. It was a decent finish, a good finish to what was a tough day of watching football with both the New South Wales Cup and the NRL teams both getting a bit of a hammering out there on CommBank Stadium. So, yeah, look, I'm looking forward now to moving ahead with the rest of the season and having as close as possible to a full-strength Eels team from here on in, fellas.
And Clint, how you doing, mate?
Yeah, look, a little bit weird. I think I was asking everyone that sits within close proximity to us whether that was our biggest loss at CommBank since we opened the doors in 2019. I think we landed at it in terms of the losing margin. I think it might be, but I feel strangely okay about it, and this is probably the only time that I will, because that any of us will, because of obviously how effective we were by Origin, coming up against a team that was at near full strength and in pretty decent form. So yeah, I it's a bit of a weird thing to answer how you're feeling after losing by 36 points and conceding 46 at home and going, I'm okay.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get into it, but, the culmination of a few factors, missing some seriously important players to the team, and then I think a couple of our depth guys who have been fantastic for about 6 weeks now, so maybe hitting a bit of a wall there too, and the fact that the Warriors are also just an outstanding team this year, so a whole set of factors there contributing to why we had the big loss at home. But before we do get into any more discussions about the Eels game last week or NRL news, quick shout out to the sponsors of the show, Big Swing Golf, North Mead, and Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan, and Parramatta, bringing you guys the podcast each and every episode. But now, boys, let's start talking some footy and some news.
News team, assemble!
Well, fellas, let's start off with what we were just chatting about then. Our final takes from the Warriors game. I just want to say a couple of things just to start off before I throw it over to you two fellas. First of all, the part that wasn't good, obviously, was the defence and a bit of not quite the right attitude in around the ruck, especially the Warriors really caught us out in behind the ruck. And then on the other side of the coin, with those players that are being out, we didn't ask any questions in attack. If you don't ask questions in attack, you're not going to be tiring out the other team with having to do a lot of defensive work. As a consequence, that gave the Warriors plenty of energy for their own attack, and it just became a bit of a vicious cycle. So I think it was as much to do with us being down in firepower in attack as it was not being in the best mental state maybe when it came to defence. So that's my final take, and I'm just prepared and ready to move on from there. Clint, what's your final take on it?
Yeah, much the same, Sixties. I mean, the the missing firepower there, well documented, well known, and I don't think any of us were expecting. Well, let's consider this: our first choice spine going into 2023 was unavailable for various reasons this game. So I think we put the to most fans the team list so that took the field last weekend. Most fans at the beginning of the year, most fans would go, well, that's a side that's going to struggle to win a game. And the disappointing part from my end is that, and you touched on it with the defense and around the ruck there, that was the controllable I was looking for us to manage well, and we just didn't. And maybe to some of 40's comments earlier, it might just be some of those relief guys just running out a bit of puff after 6 or so weeks in first grade. And that's the difference between to being a consistent first grader and being in and out of first grade, is that you're able to take advantage and I guess take your opportunities every single week. So some things to work on, and we'll get into the team list a little bit later. But we just kind of cop it on the chin, and unfortunately, we're the victim of a multitude of circumstances that led to this scenario. So let's hope that in the future we actually do have a bye in Origin affected games moving forward.
Yeah, that would be nice. 40, anything you want to add to these final takes?
Yeah, look, you don't want to try and absolve responsibility in a loss like that, but given the fact that there were significant mitigating factors for the team, and look, there's in the team review when they're going to sit down and do that, which I would have done already. So in the past tense, when they sat down and did it, they're obviously going to be critical of areas where we were lacking. You pointed out 60s in behind the ruck, we were very weak defensively, so that's obviously going to be a key point of emphasis for the training to come out of it. But the Warriors played great football. We saw a game where against Manly, we dominated possession and territory, and we could execute a game plan without real strong playmakers. And even then, we had Quentin Gufferson in the team against the Warriors, who are markedly better than Manly right now, having no 7. And Dejan Arce, look, he's doing a great job, but he's not Mitchell Moses, so no 7 in that regard, no fullback, our number 2 dummy half, and no Dylan Brown there as well. So like you said, Quint, missing the entire starting spine from round 1. We saw what happens when you don't have the ability to convert your opportunities into points, and the Warriors are able to absorb the pressure, flip the field, and go on and score. And that's what good teams do, and good teams have good players in them, and we just didn't have our great players in those spots. So yeah, like I said, you don't want to try and absolve responsibility in this game, but it is what it is. Under strength, up against a good team, didn't play our best football. And that's probably where we should let it lie. We're going to be better than that, and we need to be better than that. And yeah, it sucks to drop that game in the context of the seeding for the top 8. It was actually a significant game that might come back to bite us in the backside, but that was the hand that we were dealt because of that whole Origin no bias scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, today, we saw Dylan Brown front the media for the first time since the much publicised incident, court case, suspension. Now, just before we talk in a little bit more depth, I just have a quick thought on this. First of all, Dylan Brown is probably going to, when he returns to the game, have a certain amount of media attention. I think today putting him in front of the media when the Eels had made their final decision as well about what is going to happen in terms of his education, an additional fine, that sort of thing. Having him front the media now might just take a little bit of pressure off what happens down the track. And it does, I thought it gave him a chance to express in a way that wasn't anything to do with a constructed club statement his remorse about what happened in what looked to be a very, very genuine way. 40, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, one thing that we unified and unanimous in saying in the wake of him being found guilty of that charge was he needs to own it. He needs to own it, become a better person. And we saw the well-prepared PR statement from the club that was written for him, and then we saw on Instagram what felt like a more personalised response, both of which were very well written. But like you said, get him in front of the cameras and give him a chance away from any sort of script or prompt to, own up to what he did was good. And, looking at it, it was definitely emotional, and it felt like there was some gravity. He understood the gravity, rather, of his actions and how much he, messed up for the other individual involved and letting both the team and the club down. And, I think it was good to get him out, and kind of like, putting mold into sunlight. Do it sooner rather than later, rather than let it fester away and shield him from the responsibility of his own actions. So, I think that was the right move, and I think there was some genuine contrition the right amount of genuine contrition from him for making that mistake.
Yeah, Clint?
Wholeheartedly agree with 40 sentiments there, and very well handled from our club. I think we should all be pretty happy with the way that our club's handled this, and in choosing to get Dylan in front of the camera today and to tackle it head on. It's that accountability piece of anyone making any mistake in any aspect of their life. We all respect people who can put their hand up and front up and take accountability for their mistakes, whatever they might be. And I think it was really good on the club's behalf and Dylan's behalf that he did that. Otherwise, those questions were always going to come. So why not tackle it head on? And I'm happy with the way that the interview panned out as well, because we saw all the genuineness and authenticity from Dylan in his remorse. And I don't think anyone who watched that interview can can lean on or say this is just standard rugby league PR. This is an individual who has real remorse for his actions. And hopefully everyone now has the opportunity to move forward, given that the legal proceedings have taken place and finished. The NRL's punishment has come in, the club's own punishment and has come in. So the next step is just undertaking his rehabilitative measures as set out by the club, and then likewise the pathway back to playing, which we anticipate will be against the Dragons in round 23.
Yeah. Okay. We now move from that sort of tough situation to the NRLW getting closer to their season launch. They had, the official season launch in terms of like a public event as part of the match day against the Warriors, and the NRLW players made their appearance out onto the field or up on the big screen as their names were announced. So that was great to see that recognition of the team there. But there was, of course, the trial match that was played out at Eric Tweedale Stadium, the old Granville Park, on Friday night. I was out there for the match. A lot of people were able to catch it on the live stream, but in saying that I was out there at the match, I was one of about probably 1,500 people that were out there for the trial game. Great atmosphere, good venue for the stadium there. It's just that right size in terms of the stand and the proximity to the ground. And I think the girls have a great new home base that they have there. For those who aren't aware, their dressing sheds there are for them only. There will be no other sporting team with access to the dressing sheds there other than the Eels. Everything inside there, their lockers, everything's branded inside there with the Eels. It's their home base there. So that's fantastic from that regard. And, of course, they had an 18-14 victory over the Dragons. John, you were, I know, watching it on the live stream. What was your overall takes of their performance?
Yeah, I thought it was really gutsy. I thought it was a pretty high-quality game, respect to the fact that it was not only a trial, but their first ever proper trial. So I thought both teams came in and played some good, tough football. Eels had the early ascendancy in terms of territory and possession, but the Dragons defended well, and then were able to repel the Eels and capitalise on a few opportunities. But I thought the Eels really settled into a rhythm. I thought the outside backs were quite good, honestly. I mean, Zali Faye with that really nice in and away to open up the scoring for the Eels. Mahalia Murphy was very strong at right centre, and Cassie Toi Hiku showed some real pace in the second, third, I suppose, of the three stanzas there. So really liked what the outside backs brought there. I thought the new recruits in Rachael, Pearson and Elsie Albert were outstanding. Albert took on a huge workload. Great physicality through the middle, some strong defence, really led the way for the Eels. And we saw very quickly how important Pearson's kicking game is going to be for the Eels. She is an absolute game changer in that regard. She has probably got the best boot, both clearing and attacking-wise, in the competition, and she really controlled the territory battle in that regard. And then from the extended roster 60s, I mean, and I should have mentioned the Cherrington sisters too, who brought a nice bit of fire to the to a trial contest there. They looked really good. But yeah, in the extended roster, we saw raw talent that probably won't be ready for big, stints in the NRLW right now, but some, flashes of real promise. I mean, we all have big raps on Rosie Beckett. She took a couple of sets to find her feel into the game, but looked really good after that. And there were some big forwards in that did a good job. I think it might have been Tyler Amiatu, the number 22, I thought put on some big hits in defense, including a really big goal line stand. But yeah, just across the park, there's some good talent there in the extended roster to work with.
Yeah. Clint, anything you'd like to add from your observations?
Yeah, look, I didn't see the game live, gents, but I certainly watched back, and there's a lot of new players that have come into this side, and it's exciting that our outside backs were able to put on the show, and then likewise that we're able to get a late winner there. It's certainly a good way to endear yourself as the you touched on them being presented on game day against the Warriors, their 60s, to really endear themselves to the Parramatta faithful, because now that there's multi-year contracts, this is our team moving forward. So, some of these new faces had an opportunity to endear themselves to the supporter base, and gee, didn't they do that with a win like that? Just, it wasn't quite a buzzer beater, but it was certainly a late try to steal it after, establishing an early lead, losing that, gaining it back. Those are the types of rugby league games that everyone remembers. And even if it's just a trial, in terms of, establishing an identity for yourselves, and as I said before, with the supporter base, it's an exciting victory, and hopefully a taste of things to come.
Well, you talked about winning over the supporter base. I can tell you one thing that the NRLW team did was, after they had a few words with the coaches back in the dressing sheds, they were out there mixing with the crowd. So they're having photos, signing autographs, talking to the supporters that are there. They were literally came out, and no exaggeration, they were spread throughout the stands there, talking to supporters, to family, to friends, whoever was there. So as far as a public relations exercise, the trial was an absolute winner. There was plenty of smiles on faces. And as you said, with regard to the victory, a win wasn't essential there, but didn't hurt. A lot of people came away even happier. So, yeah, great start there. And just on that, Kennedy Cherrington and Rachael Pearson have been appointed as co-captains for the season. It seems like a pretty straightforward decision. As Forty mentioned, we know what we're going to get with Kennedy. Kennedy's the absolute inspiration within the team. She's almost like the energy barometer within the group. And the thing is, that she's going to bring that passion of playing for the blue and gold. She loves Parramatta. She absolutely does. And Parramatta loves her back. They had a great presentation that they made, which I was able to share on Instagram, of the framed Australian jersey that the Eels presented to her on Friday night. There's just, it's a fit. It's a perfect fit between her and the Eels. And as Forty mentioned as well with Rachael, she's going to be the real general out there on the field. And the way that the Eels benefited in that first 20 minutes of the trial with her kicking game, the Dragons could barely get out of their half. And that had a lot to do with the pinpoint kicking game, followed by a really good kick chase and good pressure that was put on defensively. So, fellas, anything more to say about them being appointed captains, or is it almost like a no-brainer? Like they are the yeah.
Look, you never get too far ahead of assumptions when you enter the early parts of the preseason, but the moment you saw Rachael Pearson being one of our top recruits, alongside Kendi being retained long term, you just felt that they were the two building stone, corner block building stones for the team moving forwards. And obviously, Elsie Albert's going to be a leader without the C next to her name in the forward pack, but in terms of the on-field generals, those two really jumped out straight away.
Yeah. So, and a huge welcome to all of the new players that have become part of the Parramatta Eels family. So, moving on, wanted to mention that there was a team beside the NRLW that got a win over the weekend, another Eels team, and that was the Jersey Flegg team. They had a 24-18 victory over the Rabbitohs, who were above them on the table, and they reversed the result of earlier this season when the Rabbitohs got the spoils. I think it was
26-16.
Was it a Rabbitohs home game?
Yeah, it was. It was at Botany. What's the mascot?
Mascot. Yeah. So, look, very strong performance from the Eels. It was 5-3. The Rabbitohs tries pretty much came from Eels errors, so they probably could have even tidied it up a little bit more. But it was a big improvement on the previous match, which was a loss that was somewhat disappointing against the Tigers. And this one, it turned it around. Even though they were missing Ethan Sanders, Sam Tuivasa, Charlie Geimer, the fellas that stepped up did a tremendous job. We saw a little bit more of Ethan Martin
scored a nice
again
try
in this one. That was a really really top-notch try that he scored. You saw his evasiveness and his acceleration in that solo try where he's gone 30 metres in terms of getting the ball on 30-metre line, but it was an arcing run, which and basically it was almost like it was the proverbial like having spiders on him, because it was like none of the South Sydney players wanted to tackle him. So they're going to have a really tight run. Well, it's going to be tight for them to qualify for finals football, but they've had the least number of buys in the entire Jersey Flegg competition there. And when you bring back in Ethan Sanders to play in the spine beside Josh Lynn, Buds Arthur, who was his service was just incredible just to watch. If you get a chance to see any of that game, it was just, whether it was the short pass, the long pass, it was just in perfect position. And he seemed to get his obligatory try as well. He's
had a nose for the try line in Jersey Flegg, hasn't he?
Incredibly so. The interesting decision that's going to have to be made, and I guess maybe it's going to be an easy one in the short term, is that you'll probably have Arpa Twiddle going back to fullback, and Ethan Martin will probably switch to wing. And you can still see the rawness of Ethan learning some of the nuances of rugby league, because although he's played rugby league in the past, he's also got that strong rugby union background. And so, some of the aspects of the responsibility of fullback in rugby league is going to be different to that in rugby union. But he may well have a future as a fullback rather than a winger. And that will be interesting coming through, because is Arpa Twiddle a fullback, or does he have the potential to be in another position? I think his background might be in the halves. You might be able to correct me on that.
I'd
40.
have to have a check in the records, but I'm not sure because I do know that if I recall correctly, he did have like a bit of a breakout year at fullback in terms of making the transition for us.
Yes.
I'll have to go back and check where he played.
I've just got that feeling that he was playing in a different position.
2022 was his first.
Queensland.
Yeah, 2022 last year was his first year at fullback apparently. So where did he go from though? Yeah, I'm not sure where he moved, like transitioned from though. So whether it was from the front line or from like wing. So, but he's made a very clean transition for both last year and for us now. So very interesting proposition, isn't it, as to where you fit all these players into different positions. And I suppose not immediately, but in the long term, some of it can be eased by pushing one of the players up to cup, depending on what's available there. But that's not a problem for any time soon.
No, absolutely. Have you got any thoughts you want to add there, Clint, or maybe you might have a few thoughts about what you saw in the New South Wales Cup?
Oh.
Well, we'll get to cup in a second. I'll just close out with this comment for Flegg. A shout out to Captain Jock Brazel, because it seems like he's been going up and down from Flegg and Cup and upwards, sideways, doing the full 360 for the better part of the last 2 months. It seems as though any time that he is an inclusion in that Flegg side, they're finding wins at the moment. So, it goes to beyond the players that you touched on and some of those moments in that game. It goes to show that I think the effect that his leadership has at that level, and also goes to show that we've got another good in there who's had the opportunity to play up and get some more senior games and minutes in the cup side.
Yeah, he had a number of interesting conversations with the officials in that game. Actually, the interesting one was I can't remember whether it was the first or second try that the Eels scored, and the South Sydney player in frustration went to kick the ball away that had been placed down, and in kicking the ball, he's put the boot into the Parramatta player who's on the ground.
Oh.
And as you would expect, the Parramatta players, pretty much led by Jock, went charging after the guilty party, and the match officials separated them and getting them to back away, and look, nothing serious evolved from there. But when they were heading back into position, the referee called Jock over for a chat about what had just transpired, and he said to Jock, "Look, he's kicked at the ball," and I think he said he didn't mean to get the player, and I think Jock had said, "Well, look, he did," and he said, "Look, I know, but you can't, you need to leave that in my hands." And then Jock said, "So is he going off?" And of course, referee said no. And in fact, I'm not even sure if the referee spoke to the offending South player for his action. I think his main concern was the Parramatta players charging in after the kicking action. So, that was an interesting one. Now let's rather than looking too much at that match between in the New South Wales Cup between the Eels and the Warriors, because I think there's enough said in the scoreline. Let's go to 40. We'll get you to give your takes on the main selections of note from this week's Team List Tuesday, and then the flow-on effect that has then had on the New South Wales Cup, because I think that is quite significant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Brad Alpha, as expected, has named his trio of New South Wales Origin reps to back up pending their availability due to injury or suspension from tomorrow night's Origin free clash, which means Quentin Gufferson will captain the team from fullback. Reagan Campbell-Gillard goes back in to partner Junior Barlow on the front row. And, of course, Mitchell Moses steers the team from halfback alongside Dejan Arce, pushes Sean Russell back to the right wing, which means Isaac Lumilumi drops out of the team. Otherwise, the back line is unchanged. In the forward pack, you've got Regin Jr., aforementioned. Brendan Hands at dummy half. Then in the back row, one change. Sean Lane, who had a bit of a rough day in his return to NRL duties after a long layoff, due to that hamstring injury, he starts on the left, which pushes Andrew Davey back to the interchange. Two backup bookends, Offiki Ogden and Makahesi Makatoa drop out of a team, and maybe the surprise inclusion for some, but I think he's actually been one of the, I wouldn't say shining lights, but been a real pleasant developer, is Luca Moretti. He holds his place on the interchange there, so he's the number 14, big bench outside there, Joe Ovengahi, Andrew Davey, Ryan Madison, giving the Eels a 4-forward bench with Maddo being, the utility in that regard there. But yeah, Ogden, Makatoa, they drop out. So does Lumi, which means that the New South Wales Cup team obviously pick up a few reinforcements there, which means that Ogden, Makatoa will start alongside Jaden Yates in the Cup. You got Murchie, Dory, and Rodwell in the back row. Lumi returns to the right wing. Dan Keir, the poor man who has been working his backside off as the 5'8". It's a bit of a generous term, but he's tried his backside off there. He finally gets out of that duty and can go back to playing in the forwards with Zach Sini now stepping in at 5'8". So maybe they'll use him as a bit of a running option from 5'8". But the balance of the team is much better this week. The back line looks much healthier. Samuel Loiser is also back to give the Eels a little bit more options out there. He'll play in the centres on the left, I imagine. But yeah, the forward pack looks a lot better. Ogden, Makatoa, Murchie, Dory, Rodwell was a pretty handy starting pack. On the interchange, you got Keir, Big Jonte Jr., Bethan Meza, Tony Mattelli, and Jeremiah Masia, so 4 forwards again. But I suppose the bottleneck for this team, as I wrote about in Team List Tuesday today, 60s, you look at that playmaking core, and look, Jordan Rankin, he's the veteran, and he still does a tidy job. But we get territory and possession in runs, and we haven't been able to really convert that for the last 4 or 5 games, allowing, not like we've also been playing off the park in other areas too, which it's unfair to level just at the spine. But that does feel like the big bottleneck for this team right now is that we can still put ourselves in positions to score, but we're really struggling to convert those opportunities. We're sort of like hoping for, either lightning to be, bottled by someone like Arthur Miller Stephen or, some opportunistic stuff. So I don't know if we can fix that this week, but at least the team does look better across the park from the backs and the forwards.
Seems to me like what they really have to address is that when points are scored, they're coming in batches of like 3 and 4 tries, one after the other. It's like the players' heads go down, or they just completely lose focus and intensity, and it just seems like the tries are far too easy when they're coming in sequences like that. Clint, anything you want to add on either the selections or performances of the team?
Yeah, look, not overly, but just an extension of the point that you were making there. That was some of the problems that we experienced in first grade against the Warriors. Is that there was that period, I think it was around the 25-minute mark, where it was 1 try apiece at that point, and then there was a flurry of points from the 25-minute mark through till half time, and that flurry of points happened when some of the guys who have been admirably up until that point filling in for our starters and keeping a lot of winning momentum going in first grade. It's both a team issue for New South Wales Cup as much as it is the players who have vacated the NRL team and going back down to that grade. So it'd be interesting to see the response that happens for New South Wales Cup this week in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, we probably spoken about this before, which is what are the options if Brendan Hands gets injured when we have no idea when Josh Hodgson is going to be returning. And there's, of course, a rumour going around that the Eels are chasing a player to return to the club in Joey Lussick. Are you hearing anything or reading anything about this, John?
Yeah, I've seen it pop up a few times in the press, and I think, was it Chamis or Carianis that mentioned it on either radio or football or TV? I can't remember. So it's clearly got some legs. He is contracted to St. Helens, I believe it is. So that'd be loath to lose a player, especially a good player like Joey. But geez, it'd be a good fit for the club. We're very familiar with him. He came in and plugged beautifully into our systems when he was here last time. When Reed went down in 2021, he carried the load magnificently. And in a way was like the almost ideal system dummy half for us, a guy that makes his tackles, gets the ball out cleanly, can run when the opportunity's there, but isn't going to overcall his half. So that would be a huge get. And then the fact that you could then put him in a rotation with Hands and maybe start Lussick and then put Hands on the bench because he comes in, goes up tempo, or can cover other positions if something goes wrong, would be huge for the team. Obviously, it's all contingent on St. Helens releasing him, so there's a lot of water to flow under that bridge. But if they don't, there's still options, I think, in the NRL. I know at the Tigers, Simpkins, I think it is, has been told he's surplus the requirements, and with Appy back this week, and what's his name, the young dummy half there, 60s. We just
De
Silva, yeah, on the rise there. There could be opportunities to throw him a lifeline at the club. But yes, it's Lussick would be bar none almost the perfect fit for us. Doesn't hurt your cap badly. Comes in, is familiar with the system, familiar with the players, has been a good fit before, and he just runs in without losing rhythm.
Yeah, he certainly doesn't lack any confidence, does he, Clint?
No, not at all. And to echo John's sentiments, the perfect archetype for us, in terms of the way that our team is set up and where our money is managed across our cap and the style of play that we employ, we don't need a $1 million hooker. What we really need is to echo John's sentiments, is a hooker that will make their tackles, can pose a threat, but isn't going to overcall the halves. And Joey Lussick fits that archetype to a T. I am a big supporter of this. I've in water cooler conversations that I've had over the last year or so, have said, geez, it would be great to have someone like him on our books still. I absolutely welcome it. I hope it happens. But if it doesn't, and we should get a clearer idea over the next probably 12 hours or so, once English time sort of catches up where St. Helens' position is and all of this, and whether the release is likely. But it's worth noting, guys, he's only just recently come back into the St. Helens team. I think he had a prominent role in their most recent victory, but he'd spent a couple of weeks out of the side, and they have a youngster there. I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but they're earmarking as a natural successor for James Roby, who's obviously long been the hooker there at St. Helens. So, if they have succession plans in place, and although Joey is contracted there for another year, it might give us a little bit of leverage and him a little bit of leverage if it's a move that Joey wants to make back to Parramatta as well. So he's hoping that there's some positive talks over the next 12, 24 hours. But if not, as John said, there's some other options in the NRL that we should look to explore and use to fill that gap before August 1. And hooker is the position that we need to add some depth to, because heaven forbid something happens to Brendan Hands at this point.
Yeah, we got good stuff in the pipeline, but just no options in the sort of current frame of the NRL. So getting Lussick on board or someone else would be huge.
Yeah, now we'll just wrap up the Eels news with a couple of things. First of all, the schools championships have been held, and we had a number of Eels players in there who performed quite admirably, did really well. But, of course, the outstanding performance and result came from the Eels' Harold Matthews captain, Josiah Funa Iuta, who was a real star for the Harold Mats this year, and he's now been rewarded for his performances at the championships by being named in the Australian schoolboys team. Probably not too much to add there other than congratulations to him, and also a bit of a shout out to the other boys who were in the championships as well, 40.
Yeah, I mean, there was no surprise that Josiah earned selection for the Australian team. He was an absolute titan for the Eels on the right edge in the Harold Matthews. Physically dominant, big engine, led the way for the team as the captain. Cleaned the pool in the end of season awards as well. Got best and fairest and players player. So he really was the benchmark for that team, and he's going to be a player to watch. Obviously, moving forwards, when you're in those sort of honours. And the other player that probably deserves a big shout out here was Lockie Konaka's 60s, who did a very good job both at Harold Matthews level and in the Schoolboys Carnival here. So he certainly enhanced his prospects both in and outside the club there. Got some attention from the Daily Telegraph, I believe. And yeah, that's a deserved rap for him because I thought he was really the real breakout surprise in the Harold Matts this year. He came on big time and was a huge part of that team.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tyson Sengalang, he was also involved in the New South Wales combined Catholic colleges, and he's no longer with the Eels, but Zadis Mwanga Tutia, who we believe now will be with the Bulldogs. He
As
also was featuring in that.
Yeah.
So all of those boys from the Eels Harold Matts team. So shout out to our Harold Matts team, to our coach, the coach Chris Howard as well, on what was although they didn't get the title, it was quite a strong season for them this year. Clint, anything you'd like to add to that?
Largely just congratulations. These honours are, they're not light honours. It's pretty hard to get to the stage that a lot of these guys get to, and then to subsequently get these type of honours. It's something special, and it's also a very good barometer of the trajectory of their young careers as rugby league players at this point. So, all I can say is congratulations, keep up the good work, and we hope to see them continue to flourish through our systems.
Yeah, I should also mention that the development squads have been playing games during the school holidays. It obviously works in well for them, both at Parramatta, Marist, and up at Kellyville. I think the Tigers and the Roosters have been the opponents in some of these trial matches. I think there's some more matches tomorrow. Might just about wrap it up. I had planned on getting to those games during the school holiday break. Unfortunately, I've had a few circumstances that have come up that have made that impossible. But just a shout out to all the young people that are taking part in those games and wearing the Eels jerseys. Keep up the good work there, and good luck with your pathways journey from here on in. And I'm just going to finish the Eels news segment with a bit of somber news that we did mention in the Instant Reaction podcast over in Jack's Bar and Grill in Parramatta Leagues on Saturday night. But we sadly have to mention the passing of Eels player number 146, Matt Johnson. Matt played with the Eels from 1955 to 1964, 162 club games, 67 first grade games, 71 reserve grade games, 24 third grade games. In 1964, he was part of Eels history when he was the captain of the Eels third grade team, who won the first ever Eels graded premiership win. And he was also, from a personal point of view, he was the 1960. He won the award in 1960 for the most consistent player. So that was, I guess, the version of the best and fairest back then. In the years since, you'd always find Matt at Parramatta games. He was a massive supporter of the club. Got involved as well with former player associations. He was a big part of the Blue and Gold Alliance. He's going to be missed by many people for his presence around the club, and just a lifetime of devotion to the Parramatta Eels. So to his family, his friends, all the many people who knew Matt Johnson, we extend our deepest sympathies, and yes, he will be missed. Fellas, that just about wraps up our Eels news. Now we're going to move on to the NRL, and of course the main part of NRL this week. Well, if we can call it NRL, because it's actually run by the state bodies, but it's State of Origin, and we've all given our thoughts on what's been transpiring in the way of team selections. We've all come to the conclusion that Freddie's selections and tactics make about as much sense as a Daryl Summers TV career. And so we go into tomorrow night. I guess all that's left for us is to give our tips on this and maybe any final words on it. I mean, I guess there's not too much more we can say when Brad Fittler said that he doesn't really have a plan around Clint Gutherson. He's basically there in case a back gets injured, and I guess he's been straightforward and honest there with that. Our captain missed the game, and he might be lucky to get any minutes on the field. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to tip that the Queensland wins by 12 points, but I am going to be cheering very, very loudly for the New South Wales team because, number one, it's got some Eels players in the team, and number two, I'm a Blues supporter, so I want to see the Blues win. I hope I'm horribly wrong with what the result is going to be. I want the Blues to win, tipping a Queensland win by about 12 points. Fellas, your thoughts?
I'll let Quint go first.
Yeah, look, I'm not too dissimilar to you. I see maybe a little bit more of a narrow margin, an 8 to 10 point victory. I think it'd be a little bit tight there, and New South Wales to valiantly try to put a little bit more respectability in this series, but still to ultimately fall short. However, I will tip our Eels boys to shine in the New South Wales efforts.
Yeah.
Yep.
My heart says I want New South Wales to do well because of the presence of all the Parramatta boys, but I look at this contest and I can't see anything but a big Queensland win. They look hungry, focused, disciplined. Billy Slater's running that team really well. And compared to the comical circumstances of New South Wales going from the pre-selection process right through to the coach not knowing what to do with one of the players he picked. And God help the podcast, you will say from an almighty tirade, if Spencer Leniu had been picked from 18th man to replace Quinton Gutherson, I would have unleashed an ungodly rant on the podcast. The fact that we would lose Quinton Gutherson to a non-playing game would have made me very, very upset. But as it is, still very frustrated. But, yeah, I hope our boys do well, and I hope that they can lead us to a win. But I just can't see any result by Queensland and Queensland by a comfortable margin.
I think if that situation had eventuated 40, we would have had to have presented a special edition of the podcast because
time.
I'm sure the three of us would have been on a rant.
I kid you not, it would have led to a game-changing precedent being set about or a player selection and availability. If Freddie had pulled that, because that game that we lost against the Warriors, and I'm not saying that having Gutherson would have completely changed the result, but there's no doubt he makes a huge difference to our team. That result might end up changing the ladder significantly at the end of the round, the regular competition. And the fact that we would have got darted out of our captain and fullback would have been crazy. So the fact that they even entertained that idea is alarming, but it speaks volumes about the New South Wales hierarchy at the moment.
I was ready to unleash, gents. I had the gun loaded and was going to tear the hidden machinations of Greg Alexander and Brad Fittler apart for wanting to, even attempting to affect our team in such a way had such events transpired. So, I guess we could say lucky for them. They thought otherwise, and they haven't further entertained that idea. But I'll be stroking the gun come around Origin 1 next year still, gents. I'm sitting there on the porch front like Clint Eastwood in Gran Torino. I'm waiting.
I like it.
Well, I'm hopeful that one of our listeners can come up with the answer to this, because it's not exactly the same, but there was an Origin match in the early 80s. Maybe Ron Willey was the New South Wales coach. Steve Ella was selected. I've got a feeling it was at 5'8". It may have been sent. I just had a feeling it was 5'8". Anyway, on the day of the match, he swapped Ella with, I believe it was Alan Thompson from Manly, so that Ella just went to the bench. And I can't even remember how much game time Steve Ella got. But anyway, maybe they're up. So we've got some listeners out there who are either prepared to do the research or it's more clear in their mind exactly what happened. But I can remember being furious with that, because I was pumped for seeing how, an Eels player went, and the fact that the coach swapped it out. And I'm pretty sure that back in those days, the team was selected not by the coach, but by a group of selectors. And to me, it was just stunning that the coach made that change on the day of the match. But anyway, we move forward. I put this into the podcast tonight because it came up on 360. It was based on some work that had come out of some stats that had come out of Fox Sports about the short dropout. And I thought it was quite interesting because we've seen what a phenomena it's become. So I just paid attention to the last 2 years rather than going back 3 years. But last year, there'd been an increase in the number of short dropouts that were taken. So that for the season, there were 98 short dropouts that were taken, and that was 22% of the total number of line dropouts that were forced. And of that, 32 were retained by the kicking team, which was 33%. That's not a bad return there, like to get a third of the dropouts back. This year, it's increased quite dramatically. So far, there've been 188 short dropouts that have been taken, which is 50% of the total number of dropouts that have been forced. Now, of that, 53 have been retained. Now, that's a drop in percentage down to 28% have been retained, but it's still sort of around that 30% mark. But the game has changed enough because of those dropouts to see quite a number of teams running it on the last and not even always trying to force something on the last, but even being prepared to turn the ball over in the corner and just say to the opposition team, okay, now you bring it out 2 meters off your line and see how far you can get in this set of 6. What's your thoughts, Clint, on what's been transpiring with regard to short dropouts, and then now conversely how that's affecting the kicking game of teams?
Well, look, even though it's 5% difference year on year, I don't think it's particularly material in terms of what it means. Obviously it's increased significantly, and there's a much greater sample size that shows, as you said, Sixties, around that 30% retention on short dropouts. But for the teams that have players that are skilled at this, it would be interesting to see the breakdown in terms of success by team or by players taking
absolutely.
it.
Absolutely. I
I'd
absolutely agree there. Yep. I'd love to see that too.
Because it would, I'm sure there's someone out there who probably has that information, or maybe if we all wake up in a good mood, we might seek it out ourselves tomorrow. But it's become a skill into and of itself, and it's kind of like I might call it the renaissance of the competitive scrum, except it's just gone into a different part of the game. And kicking for the better part of the last 30 years of rugby league has been a skill that's improved as we've gone through the years, and more and more players are becoming more skilled at it and creating opportunities for largely in try scoring situations, but also in terms of controlling possession and field position. And this is just yet another tool in that arsenal. And I'm very big on a style of rugby league that controls field position and limits the amount of time the opposition has with the ball. And given that this has now come into the game, to answer your second question, Sixties, I'm more than happy to turn the ball over 1 meter, 2 meters out in the corner. If that means I get, you hear it across some rugby league grounds all over the country every week. It still makes me chuckle even after many, many years of watching rugby league. The free hit call that comes off a tap or from a penalty or from a turnover possession inside the red zone, and when the opposition has to try and carry it out of their red zone, free hit. jokes aside, it really allows the opportunity for the team who's just been attacking the line, if they haven't succeeded in scoring, to apply pressure the other side of the ball. So, it's sustained pressure for the team that's defending their try line to then have to try and carry it in and out of their 20. And normally it's only if you can somehow get a quick play the ball and a fast carry out of that, that's generally the only way out of that scenario. So, for teams, it allows, and I said I like to play control. If I'm coaching a side, I like to see them control field position. If you're turning it over in that field position, 2-3 meters out, it really allows you to dictate the course of play for probably the next 5 to 10 minutes if you're able to sustain that pressure. Provided you're not giving away any penalties or making any mistakes. So, it's a double whammy when it comes to the short dropout. In that, if you're a side that's worried about the opposition who can or does have good control over the short dropout, that you'd rather just turn it over because that's more of a controllable, then you do so. So yeah, it's an interesting evolution that's come into our game. And I'm trying to recall, gents, maybe one of you might know off the top of your head where we really sort of started to see it become part of the game. And when someone, who was the first person to pull the trigger and go, you know what, stuff it. We reckon we're an even money chance of getting this back. Let's see how we go. Because teams these days are a lot more confident defending their own try line than they are 20, 30 meters out. So yeah, no. Can either of you recall who it was that sort of started that?
I think maybe the metagame influences would have been the Walker brothers up in the QRL, going back a fair bit now. But I think, if I recall correctly, and I could be wrong about this, I think maybe it might have been the Bulldogs when they were. I don't know which coach it was. Was it Barrett? Was it
maybe Pay?
Maybe Pay, where they were a little bit, devil may care because they were pretty ordinary and figured they might as well start trying to get possession back. But there's a lot of game theory with short dropouts. I'm a big fan of it because there's a lot of layers in terms of the statistics of it. But you're weighing essentially the expected points the opposition will score on a normal dropout versus that of a short dropout, right? And where the break even is, and then the opportunity to get possession back. So you got multiple factors sort of intersecting there, and I think the opportunity cost of a short dropout makes a lot of sense to go for it. You can give away a penalty. Yeah, they're going to get possession on your goal line, but like you said, Quint, a lot of teams prefer to defend on the goal line because you can use the sideline much more aggressively in defense. And
you can drop a marker off as well.
Yeah, you drop a marker off, so you're negating the positional disparity in terms of the man advantage. So there's a lot to like there. And yeah, I know that a lot of the oldies hate it. Just before recording, I think NRL Tonight had Spud on, and that's where the stats came from. I think Sixties, or at least one of the outlets, and he despised the idea of the short dropout. And that doesn't surprise me. It's a very old school mentality there, and this is very much new school stuff. And like I said, I think that the game theory suggests that you should always go short dropout just about, unless there is like some incredibly specific or niche game situation where for whatever reason you don't want them near the goal line. But even kicking long these days where there might be a field goal in play, the 2-point field goal is now an option as well for certain things. There might even be a game situation where you deliberately don't want to kick long because you can give an option for a 2-point field goal rather than, the 1-point field goal. So I don't know.
Yeah, there's also a lot of teams feel that they can defend a lot better 10 metres out from their line. Exactly. 20, 30 metres out from their line. The other thing too, I think we probably did start to see that surge of it in 2021, which is why those stats were presented on NRL Tonight. I'll tell you who I remember back to as a coach throwing this out there, not all the time, but maybe a bit more than usual, was Brian Smith. And he had Parramatta chance in their hand from time to time, especially 2001. Like we chanced out a few times in that year. But anyway, we move on. A couple of other bits and pieces around the place. The Josh Reynolds retirement. I guess you can say that he's always been a passionate Bulldog. The thing that's surprising was that it was only really 7 years at the Bulldogs before. It felt like it was longer. So, I guess he's one of those players that just wished he never left the club that he felt most comfortable at. And maybe that's a lesson to players out there about, stay with your heart, because you often play your best football where your heart's in it. So anything you wanted to add to that, boys?
Well done on a good career. He's an Origin Series winning half. There in 2014, and certainly one of the characters of the game as well. He's it is strange to say 7 years. I agree, 60s. It does feel like he'd been with the Bulldogs and around Belmore a lot longer than that. But I think he played in 2 grand finals as well. Unfortunately, wasn't able to win one. But it's a pretty solid rugby league career. It's better than what most get. So, and on top of some of those accolades, and I said he's a character of the game. I'm sure there'll be many Bulldogs fans who will be wishing him the best in retirement, and he's much loved down there. It's appropriate that his final professional game, albeit it'll probably be in New South Wales Cup, is taking place at Belmore.
Yep, absolutely, John.
Well, cumulatively, I felt like he should have spent about a year suspended for tripping, but I don't think he served a single game. But in saying that, he always brought plenty of energy to the teams he was on, whether it was the Dogs or Tigers or in the ESL. And I will say this: he's one of those players that you probably love to have on your squad or in your squad. He's just a whole ball of energy. He just brings a lot of good vibes, I suppose, to there. And from what I've heard, both from my family directly and from other people, apparently he's a pretty good bloke off the field too. So, look, there was a minor controversy about him retiring to help the Dogs free up a top 30 spot. In the big picture of cap rorting and even specifically the Bulldogs, which we'll talk about shortly, I don't think there's too much in it. I think someone like Reynolds, if he's going to hang up the boots for the club he loves, I think you let, pardon the pun, but sleeping dogs lie.
Yeah, absolutely true. Absolutely true. And speaking of interesting signings, we've had Matt Lodge now go to Manly on a train and trial. I mean, that's the terminology that's been used, but essentially that means he signed a second-tier contract to go to Manly. So they, of course, can use anyone outside the top 30 at this time of the year. So maybe that's playing the system just a little bit to be getting someone who's on huge coin, on basically zero money.
The particulars of his NRL contract will be fascinating if we could get them publicly, because are the Warriors still paying for him? Are the Roosters paying for him? Did he actually get a full-on release from the contract? Like, was it a mutual release and he was a free agent? I don't know.
Yeah.
Because that is pretty important to stipulate the differences there. But
who's his manager?
I could not tell you off the top of my head. I'll see if
Is it Isaac Moses?
He is. I don't know.
Or Moses' company is.
Maybe he was Moses. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm never sure of how up to date.
Yeah, maybe he was, because I do recall there was some discourse in the media on, like, maybe on 360 talking about how the fallout from the Joseph Swaliti stuff was also related to Matt Lodge or something. Maybe. So that might be my memory being fuzzy. I don't know, but yeah.
Is there something going on over at Manly with
Isaac Moses?
a particular player manager starting to get a bit of influence there?
That's been another thing they've talked about on 360. I suppose you could make the argument that given the pool of player managers available, at some point there's going to be a manager that just has more of his rostered players at a certain club. So I don't know. Maybe there is something to it. Maybe there isn't. Player managers in general just have so much power in the game, don't they? When there's a limited amount of them and they control all the superstars and all the young kids. That is how it is.
Well, I guess it's a matter of watch this space if that does eventuate that it is Isaac Moses, whether it's something that it becomes a topic on any of those particular talk shows on Fox. Finally, fellas, we saw the, could we say, attempted rort? I mean, the controversy is blew up even more tonight. Well, from last night, where Phil Gould denied that there'd been any approach from the Bulldogs or from Laundy with regard to an offer to Tino Fasua-Malaawi that involved the share investment in the hotels. Phil Rothfield is adamant that he got the information both from other clubs who had pulled out of negotiations with Tino, and also from Mr. Laundy himself, who detailed what he was going to be offering Tino, or had offered Tino, in the way of the shares that were guaranteed return. So
it's like an Abbott and Costello skit.
There's two completely different controversies going on here, because first of all, you've got the situation where that's a straight out rort, because it's a club sponsor saying we're prepared to help you invest in our business as an enticement for a player to come. I mean, it's just it's so bold, it defies logic. It's and then of course we have journos who are quite prepared to say, as because I think maybe it was, I can't remember, it might have been Rothfield that said we need more people like Laundy in rugby league who are prepared to do these sorts of things. And I'm thinking, am I going mad? Did I just hear we need more people in rugby league that are looking to rort the system?
Yeah.
And then they were talking about how that sort of deal could be fair, like him and Brent Reid, how that sort of deal is or could be made fair, and how we shouldn't be dragging down the top clubs. We should be pushing the bottom clubs up. And I'm thinking, but it's how is breaking rules or bending rules meant to be helping anyone? Like, you don't want people like that in the NRL, surely. And then, of course, as I said, it's a twofold thing, because now the next controversy is Phil Gould's gone on the attack on 100% footy, and he's absolutely smashed into Phil Gould, into Rothfield. He's had a crack at Chamis as well, across the room from him in that show, but he's really gone both barrels at Rothfield. Said Rothfield, basically, I think he's accused Rothfield of inventing it for personal reasons and for a grudge against Canterbury and him. And Rothfield's just tonight gone, you know what, I've got all the notes from the phone conversations, and this happened.
He kept the receipts for once.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, as I said, there's a controversy on two levels. I mean, where do you begin to unpack this? It's just, I mean, to me, it's a diabolical attempt at a rort.
Mm-hmm.
And then secondly, someone's bold-faced lying here. Is it Rothfield or is it Gould?
This whole thing, I'll say from the start, has big, was it Naked Gun, Steve Martin, nothing to see here while the building's blowing up in the background sort of energies here. There is clearly, something very untoward going on in terms of salary cap rorting here, and the fact that the NRL aren't going to press the matter, and the fact that Gould is either bold-faced lying or Rothfield is, completely fabricating stuff, and he reckons he's got the receipts. So, if the guy is willing to pull the receipts out, then I'm going to back him. There is something, and we talk about it all the time, but catastrophically wrong with the way the salary cap is monitored. And I think Laundy at one point in his transcripts of Rothfield came out and made it a statement along the effects of he just wanted to help out the small clubs so they can compete with signings compared to the big clubs. We're talking about the Bulldogs that just signed Matt Burton, Josh Adokar, Tavita Pungai Jr., Viliami Kika, Reid Marnie, the bloke from the English Super League, Stephen Crichton. Like, I'm sorry, what signing problems do you have compared to the big clubs? You've been the market shakers for like the last 3 years. That's not your problem for not winning games. But yeah, the fact that they're quite clearly trying to rot the cap and nothing's going to come of it, just speaks volumes to where the game is in terms of transparency with this sort of stuff. But it's something we've spoken about many times. You go back through the history of salary cap scandals, including Parramatta's own dance with the NRL Integrity Unit and the salary cap auditors. All of it has either been whistleblowers or the club coming to the NRL to face up to their own crime, saying, "Hey, we've made a big mistake here. We'd rather take it to you guys rather than get in court." The NRL don't want to catch cheaters. It's like so obvious right now. It always has been, rather.
Yeah, well, you would think that as soon as that's been said, and I loved your Frank Drebin, Leslie Neil. It was Leslie Nielsen.
Leslie Nielsen, not Steve
Leslie,
Martin. Yeah, sorry,
yeah. But your Frank Drebin analogy there.
Yeah.
But wouldn't you think, right? As soon as this has come out, if you're an NRL auditor, you're going, I think I need to go and pay a visit to the Bulldogs.
Yeah.
I think I might need to review the contracts that they've got there at the moment. Forget this proposed one. They've got those other big deals that have happened. Let's have a close look at that. Let's have a look at the whatever the personal finances are of some of these players that have just come across.
Mm-hmm.
Because we were informed that there was a last-minute increase in the contract offer to Reid Marnie when the Eels were coming up with a bit more money to try to keep Reid Marnie. And then there was just that much more that was offered to him from the Bulldogs that they couldn't compete. That's as we were informed.
Well,
so whether that's the case or not, we don't know. But that was the speculation that was out there. So, I mean, like, have the Bulldogs shot themselves in the foot with this, or as you say, 40, are the NRL just not interested in doing a genuine dig into what's happening there at the club?
Yeah, I think that the NRL, the Bulldogs rather, have made a massive blunder and did shoot themselves in the foot, but the way the NRL works means that they won't really pay for it. Because like you said, the moment this came out, it should have sent off red flags and klaxons and sirens in the integrity unit and the salary cap auditing unit in the NRL saying, hang on, this does not add up. This smells real funky. But nope, we're not seeing anything, and we're having Gould call out journos like almost ridiculously on a public platform. So yeah, this is one area of the game where I'm very cynical and have lost a lot of faith in the game itself. But and like I said, the Eels have been guilty of it too. It's not like me being holier than thou. The Eels have absolutely been guilty here. But the fact that the NRL are incapable of catching anyone just like intrinsically just speaks volumes to what the sort of mission statement is. So I expect nothing to come from this. I don't think they'll sign Tino, but I don't think they'll be punished for making a very obvious blunder as well.
Well, Clint, do you see basically what 40 described? Nothing to see here will be the result.
Oh, it would absolutely be the result. But, as fans of the wider game, we should absolutely not expect the mantra of pissing down our back and telling us it's rain. Because that's exactly what it feels like when you have the journalists in the immediate try to suggest that a deal like that could be possible. Excuse me, what? No. And trying to do it from the angle and perspective of fighting for the little guy. Why? They're the little guy because they've been at the bottom of the table for
because they're the little guy now, and then if you're allowed to do that in like the space of 12 months, they're going to be the big dogs forever. Like
exactly,
the whole
exactly right. That's how quickly it shifts, and it's not as though Canterbury is short of resources. They've got a very wealthy leagues club.
Mm-hmm.
They just haven't been managed well from a roster perspective for a period of time, and then they pulled the trigger on firing coaches way too soon into their tenure. It's just a lack of patience and a lack of planning that's really and emotional responses to those situations that's been Canterbury's problem.
That entire conversation that you're articulating, Quinn, about what the journos sort of parlayed it's essentially tantamount to the MLB cap, which is there is no cap. Clubs spend whatever they want, whether they want to be stingy as hell and just rake in membership and sponsorship, membership and merch money and sort of milk the fans for their loyalty, or you want to be, the New York Yankees, the LA Dodgers, and spend essentially triple, quadruple, 5 times other people's salary caps. And that's a sort of parity. You can imagine what sort of parity you get in baseball, but that's the sort of parity you're going to get where, a handful of clubs, not only do they just only win the premiership, but they're only ever competitive. That is a natural path for what those journalists are talking about if you're going to allow that sort of thing to be predicated in the NRL. Yeah, and
it's the same in European football.
Yeah,
as well.
Exactly. It is literally trickle down economics in sports. So, yeah, I like the NRL salary cap model compared to other codes in the world. Like I said, the lack of commitment to actually trying to police it is frustrating from my perspective. But even so, with the lack of policing, we still have one of the most competitive and parity-driven competitions in the world. And yeah, there's going to be teams that suck for prolonged periods, but like we've discussed, a lot of that is due starting to the front office issues, where you've got bad boards, bad CEOs, bad leadership there. So I'd rather the NRL prioritize getting that stuff fixed rather than opening up these insane cap discussions.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just to finish things off, fellas, final thoughts about the RLPA's match day media ban. 40 and I spoke about it coming into the round as part of the preview podcast because as is typically the case, the big news broke between podcasts.
They're good.
So
they know how to do it.
So we did include it as part of the preview podcast, our thoughts on it. And we both said that the RLPA had actually was treading quite lightly in this as the chosen industrial action because it wasn't really impacting on the fans at all, despite what the media were saying. The media were saying that they'd essentially treated the fans with disdain, with disrespect, that it was punishing the fans for what was going on. And I mean, we both took the position that how is a few comments on match day impacting us as fans? Like the matches are going ahead, the premiership's going ahead, the media through the week promoting the games is going ahead. It's minor. The only people it seems to be affecting is really the host broadcasters or associated media around the host broadcasters. I think it's been quite a gentle approach as far as, well, maybe not gentle is not the right word, but I think I actually think that the RLPA has taken the fans into consideration with this chosen act. So the weekend has just come and gone. As far as I'm concerned, nothing's changed my mind on that. I was at the game, so there was zero impact on me at the game. Like, I missed nothing by being at the game. As far as what was on TV, if I missed a few pre-match, halftime walking off the field or post-match comments, I didn't feel it. So anyone feel any differently?
No, I mean, we were all at the game on Saturday, but maybe we put it out to people to add in the comments who watched televised. Did you actually miss a halftime comment with a player struggling to catch their breath and reorientate themselves after
and
40 minutes of intense rugby league?
One of any 100 rugby league truisms. Like, yeah, I don't think so.
Oh, exactly right. It's rugby league cliche bingo when it comes to that. Like that's what they play. Like, surely the journalists who, given the remit by their broadcasting employers, asking those questions and conducting those halftime 30-second interviews with players, know exactly what they're going to get and don't want to do it. I personally don't see any value in it. The players themselves don't like it. Sean Lane and Jermaine Hopgood were jerking it on the Eels podcast last week, and that they don't ever really know what's going on or really care to do it. Likewise, I don't think it adds any particular value. Why are we all kidding ourselves?
I mean, I think the real reason the media is blowing up is that they're almost like a proxy, right? Because they're aligned more to the governing body than the players, even though the players are the product. the media work a lot closer with the actual governing body than the players. So I think that's a big factor there, and hence the faux outrage, being driven up to hysterical
Which
levels.
is exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Exactly what it is.
So I think in terms of the actual brouhaha, I don't think a storm in a teacup even qualifies here. Like we said, 60s, this is very much hitting the NRL for feather duster in terms of industrial action. And if they feel the conviction their grievances, and listening to Quinton Newton and sort of some stuff they're laying out, I don't think they're being unreasonable in what they're trying to stipulate to really dot the I's and cross the T's and have a voice in regards to player welfare with games played in the season, trying to put a cap on that with the expansion coming to the NRL, the future fund and sort of pensions for players that get injured, allocation of NRLW resources. All those things are very reasonable and like stand equal in stature to the actual overall value of the NRL salary cap. So the fact that they're really trying to get this ironed out, I don't blame them. And like I said, if it comes to having to stand down games, whether it's this year or next year, if it gets to that point, I can understand it. And yes, it sucks as a fan, but this is important for them. So I can understand where they're coming from. And yeah, I would be upset as a fan not to see games, but not as someone that sees where they're coming from.
One final bit of news that I just wanted to throw to you, gents, that's broken in the last couple of days is 10 teams have expressed their interest in going to Vegas for round one next year. The Parramatta Eels were not one of these teams. Me personally, I'm happy with this, and I say that with the caveat that I've got family that lives very close to Vegas, and there's a natural bias in me wanting to go there, but I personally am glad the club doesn't have an inclination at this particular point to go. I wanted to throw to you to close us off in today's podcast, gents. What were your thoughts on Vegas? I might start with you, 40.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we've spoken both neutrally with you, Quinn, and also with a special guest, Ron, in America about the viability of the NRL as a product in America. And I don't mind the NRL exploring that in a serious means, but I am also very happy that the Eels aren't part of the inaugural wave of teams going over there. We've got our hands full with the home game being taken to Darwin and the logistics behind that and how much it can impact the season. I don't really care for the team getting bogged down on a 2 week, I suppose even like you could even build as like a junket in a way to Las Vegas and what that could do to your season in terms of getting used to time zones, the long flight, playing on turf that could lead to a high risk of turf toe and a few other things. Playing on the surfaces over there is not the same as playing on the natural grass in Australia. They use synthetic or artificial in a lot of places. So yeah, there's a lot of factors there, and right now I'm just happy that we aren't involved. As much as I do love American sports and the idea of Australia breaking in there with the NRL, yeah.
And
As
60s?
for me, yeah, as far as I'm concerned, I agree with what 40 said so far in terms of we've had enough on our plate with taking things up to Darwin. But even aside from that, if you look at the first year, there's going to be lessons learnt from the first year. Now, you have to assume that what's going to happen is that if this is going to be an ongoing venture, every club is going to get their opportunity. I would much rather be amongst the clubs that get their opportunity after some lessons have been learnt and it's done really well. And I'm not saying that it wouldn't be done well the first time, but you know that it won't be done as well as it could possibly be when it's the first time going there. You know that if it's working, if it doesn't work for a start, then there's nothing lost. If it is something that is going to work, it's going to be better the more often that you go there. So either it doesn't work and there's nothing lost, or it does work and you're better off going when any kinks are ironed out and it's as smooth as possible process and that you start to maximise whatever benefits there are for the NRL or for the individual clubs. So I have no problem with the Eels not putting their hands up to be the first ones. And look, the same thing happened with the NRLW, didn't it? Parramatta said they weren't ready to be one of the first clubs. Parramatta is now a significant member of the NRLW. We weren't the first, but we weren't the last. So I would suggest that, you know, we probably took our lessons from, you know, how we've gone with those sorts of ventures, and I have no problem with the decision whatsoever. So
it's a very measured approach, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think supporters should be grateful of that as well. So look, if it all goes ahead, it's going to be very exciting. It seems like it's all going to go ahead for this first year. So yeah, it will be very new, and we'll see what comes of it and how they are able to market and promote it, not only in the first year but then in the subsequent years, and to be part of that.
Has the NRL
going
made any discussions about the time, so the actual game time slots, about where they'll be played? Are we going to cater towards the American market or cater towards the Australian market for broadcasting?
I believe I don't know about the time slots, but I think those games will take place not in that same weekend as the round one. So it will be like a pre-round one that those matches take place, which then gives the teams time to travel and get back and then settle for round two. Yeah, as I understand.
As someone that watches a lot of NFL, you know, the time slots range from 3 o'clock in the morning through to 12 o'clock PM, sort of kickoffs, depending on whether you're East Coast, West Coast, whether you're playing morning game or evening primetime game. And obviously Las Vegas occupies the westmost time slot in America. So, you know, I follow the Seattle Seahawks.
It's 12 a.m. now at time of recording. So,
yeah, exactly. So I follow the Seattle Seahawks, and if they get a primetime game in America, that means it's going to be like an 11:30 p.m., 12 o'clock p.m. 11:30 a.m., 12 o'clock p.m. kickoff in Australia, or earlier, depending on what slot they get. So if you're catering towards the American audience, which you assume you would need to in order to get people into the stadium, it means it's going to be some very awkward broadcast slots back in Australia. So you'd probably have to make sure it's on a weekend in Australia, which means we're a day ahead of them. So you need to be playing
Friday night is probably the prime spot.
Yeah, so
Friday night American time.
Yeah, that probably works there. You're talking about Friday night football for sure.
Yeah,
which is our Saturday.
Well, fellas, talk about a chock-a-block episode again from all the aspects of what's been happening in Para through to all these topics on the NRL. I mean, each of them could probably be almost a podcast in itself, especially some of the things that are going on around the NRL. But we are now at the end of this podcast. Thank you, fellas, for your input tonight. Thank you to our sponsors, which is Big Swing Golf at Northmead and Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta. The support is fantastic. Thank you also to our listeners for getting onto the podcast on a regular basis. If you're watching this / listening to this on YouTube, please subscribe, because it helps all the metrics and helps our channel to grow. So can I encourage you to do that? And we'll be speaking to you again in the preview podcast in a couple of days' time. And until then, go you mighty Eels.